So one of the things that I'll do is if I feel like I'm going up too far into my sympathetic nervous system after working out, I will
Mm-hmm.
come home and I'll lay on the couch or lay on my bed and just tap into what are the sensations I'm feeling and let that energy come down, let that energy dissipate out of my system. And
Yes.
it takes sometimes I only need 2 minutes, sometimes I need 5 minutes, sometimes I need 10 minutes, but it's that simple of just allowing our bodies that 5-10 minutes to come down.
Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your divorce survival guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back, and now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact. Hey everyone, welcome back. So I have some news before we get into this episode that I wanted to share with all of you. You might have seen it already on Instagram, but I'm recording this introduction on Tuesday. And on Friday, Ethan proposed to me. And I said yes. Spoiler, I said yes. And I cannot begin to tell you what a absolutely 100% joyous experience this is for me this time around. And I am so incredibly happy, and I am grateful that I have gotten to and chosen to share the entire experience with you guys, because it has been so affirming to me about the possibilities of love existing for me in a way that I really, really never thought it would. I used to say, I think I've told you this, I would say to my best friend, Ray, all the time, I'd be like, yeah, I don't think it exists for me, honey. I just don't think it exists for me. And he'd be like, you're out of your goddamn mind. And I'd be like, I don't know, man. I've been single for 8 years so far. It just looks like it doesn't exist for me. And that's okay. And I was like, it's okay. Like, it has to be okay. There was this balancing of it's okay. And also like, it would be great if I could have that thing. I think I was talking to Christine Cocciola about this a while ago, and we were just catching up. And we were talking about how, like, there's a difference between like, I'm happy on my own. I don't know. I was content, right? I was content on my own. In a way, I think I was resigned. So first I was resigned, and then I learned to be content. Moments of happiness, sure, but it wasn't like I was overjoyed to be alone. It wasn't what I would have chosen, but I had learned to be okay with it. I had learned to accept that this might be my fate and my lot and all of those things. And I think in so doing, I really created the space. Everyone's talking now about how there are all these TikToks, Reels, whatever, about how when men are dating nowadays, they're not competing with they're not sort of slotting themselves into a woman's desperation or anything like that. They are competing with her alone time, with her complete fulfillment of self. And that's sort of the way that I felt going into dating this time. I was like, and I've said this to you a million times, if it didn't add to my life, if it wasn't a benefit to my life, if it wasn't going to be extraordinary, I didn't need it. I didn't want it. And that's what Ethan has brought. I've never experienced actually being chosen in the way that Ethan chooses me. He actively chooses me from day one. After our very first date, when we got home and he texted me, I am turning off my profile. I am deleting it. He didn't deactivate it, he deleted it. And to asking me to move in and then asking me to marry him. And he did ask me, he said, I want you to move in, but do you want to be engaged before we move in, or do you want to live together first? And I was like, no, I want to be engaged first. I don't want to, I want that intentionality. And he was like, okay. And it was like a done deal. So the proposal was wonderful. I don't want to take up too much time from this episode telling you all about it, but it was beautiful. We went to where we had our first date. He had a bit of a ruse going on with getting me there and had everything planned with the restaurant in advance. And it was really beautiful. And it was also very simple, and it was very perfect for us. So I'm getting married. The Divorce Survival Guide is getting married. All right. How about that? So I am going to move on off of my news and on to today's episode with Laurie James. She's been on the show before. I love talking to Laurie. We are talking today about nervous system healing, somatic experiencing, and the intersection of somatic experiencing with attachment work. So this is a super cool conversation about sort of weaving all of these things together. And I think Laurie is just she's great at explaining somatic experiencing and how it supports healing and the connection between nervous system regulation, somatic work, and attachment styles. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Laurie James. Laurie, thank you so much for coming back on to the show. This is your third time, right?
It is my third time, and I feel so honored to have been invited back all these times. It's definitely been a journey.
It has. And one of the reasons that I keep having you back, and one thing I love about you is that you keep kind of expanding your body of work and what you do and your areas of expertise. And I think it's awesome. Let's start with the basics. You have been on the show before talking about somatics and somatic healing, but I think since the last time we spoke, you have deepened some of your work in this a lot.
So I'll start with the basics. So somatic is taken from the Greek word soma, which means body. So that's the easy, because everybody, there's a lot of people throwing around the word somatic this, somatic yoga, somatic meditation. The program that I was trained in was created by Peter Levine, he's a PhD. He's up there with
OG. He's OG.
Yes, he is the OG with Stephen Porges and Dick Schwartz with IFS. I mean, and he's getting up there. He's in his 80s, early to mid 80s. He's still teaching this stuff. He wasn't my personal teacher, but this somatic experiencing, your listeners can go back and listen to the recording we did a year ago, but it was life-changing for me after I left my marriage because I fell very ill. I won't go into all the details, but it was life-changing. And so that's why I ended up getting trained in it. I thought, wow, if this can help me so much, I want to be able to also help others. And then throughout my training, because I'm kind of a lifelong learner, I've also done some training in attachment theory and attachment styles. After doing both of these, I realized there was such an intersection between the two that we kind of talked about before, to kind of dive into. But going back to the somatic piece is what happens is we have been taught not to feel, not that our emotions are uncomfortable or I don't want to feel those. And a lot of that happened in our childhood. And also our attachment styles have happened in our childhood because we adapted based off of what our current situation is. So, and all of this is driven by our autonomic nervous system. autonomic nervous system is really responsible for how we feel. So if we didn't necessarily have caregivers that showed up and helped us feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
then our nervous system is going to react, and it's either going to go into more of an anxious state or avoidant, or maybe a combination of both,
Mm.
being the disorganized. The interesting thing is research shows that our caregivers really only needed to be there 30% of the time for us to form a more secure imprint,
Mm.
which I don't know that I fully believe that.
30%. I mean,
30%. There's been like Harvard research has showed this, but I feel like it needs to be a little bit more than that personally, but I'm just
I'm with you, Lori. 30%. I mean, and also we're Gen X. So like
right.
we're like, well, if it was only supposed to be 30%, why are we so fucked up?
Right. And why have I had to do years and years of work to get to where I am today?
Were they really only there like 5%?
Right.
I don't know. Oh my God. Oh yeah, 30% seems like for a Gen Xer, 30% seems like a lot.
I know, right?
Oh my God, hilarious.
I know.
All right, so we disagree with that little bit of piece of data,
Yes.
but moving on.
Yes. So a lot of our dysregulation growing it happened when we were growing up, and we had to adapt.
I want to just sort of dig in a little bit more to the sort of autonomic nervous system and how it operates and what shifts when we start to engage with it more intentionally.
So again, our autonomic nervous system is responsible for how we're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for instance, if something happens and you feel like a restriction in your chest, or you feel like a restriction in your gut, because typically when we're having some type of reaction to some interaction with someone else, it's going to show up in our bodies. So what we want to do is, instead of pushing away from that, and it's like, I don't want to feel the anxiety, I don't want to feel the bubbling in my gut or the tingling in my hands. So I'm going to move away, and I'm going to either be active, or I'm going to, whatever it is, I'm going to go organize my closet, or I'm going to reorganize my kitchen, whatever it is. If we can take a moment or two or longer, once you develop the capacity to just notice what you're feeling inside. Notice that restriction, and be with it and befriend it instead of pushing it away. That's when we can expel that excess energy that otherwise will stay stuck in our bodies. And then the next time we have a similar experience, or our body is going to react at a heightened state, because we need to complete that fight, flight, or freeze response when we're up in our sympathetic nervous system. And our nervous system is meant to come up into a sympathetic and then ideally come down into a parasympathetic. So sympathetic is just activation. So it's our bodies coming into the day, like we're walking our dog, we're getting ready for work, we're working out, right? So that moves us into a sympathetic state of activation of some sort. People can also push us into a state of sympathetic, depending on what they're saying to us, or if they frustrate us.
Right.
So a healthy nervous system is one that then can come back down into a parasympathetic, which is what we call rest and digest throughout the day. But oftentimes in our society, and our society rewards us to go, 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 do, be. We're not being, we're human doings.
Yes.
So we need to sometimes retrain our nervous system to either, come up into a sympathetic, because we can also get stuck down in that parasympathetic, or below into a shutdown, or we need to learn to come down or into a rest and digest, because we've lived in survival mode. And a lot of the women and or men who are listening to your podcast and they're going through a divorce, they are most likely stuck up in their sympathetic nervous system because there's so much uncertainty going on in their lives right now. And
Absolutely.
having been there before, I know, and it wreaked havoc on me, which I talked about in the last podcast.
Yeah, well, let's touch on that. Like you were stuck in your sympathetic nervous system for so long that you ended up in the hospital, right?
Yeah. Not once,
So,
but twice.
right.
And so what happened is my body shut down.
Yeah.
My body shut down, and I was in this state where it literally felt like I had stuck my finger in a light socket, but was immobile. We call this toxic immobility
Mm.
because I was down in what's called a dorsal vagal shutdown. So it was like my body wanted to, but I couldn't. It's
Mhm.
that I want to, but I can't. I want to, but I can't state that some of us can feel like we're stuck in.
Yeah.
And that is,
And I want to
you
being
develop numbness, you disassociate when you're down in that state.
And I want to, meaning like I want to eat, but I can't. I want
Yes.
to go for a walk, but I can't. I want to get
Yes.
off the couch, but I can't.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Been there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
we
I'm
actually
sorry, but
no, we talked about this recently on your podcast.
yes. Yes. Which is a
Where
great, that was a great podcast that will be dropping soon. So definitely
yeah,
take a listen. You had some good
yeah,
info in there.
yeah, we talked about how you and I both ended up in the same trauma recovery program
Yeah.
in Arizona, which was amazing. So go and listen to
Yeah.
that episode on Laurie's podcast. So, okay, so now let's talk about attachment styles. I'm really interested in this marriage or the connection between nervous system regulation, somatic experiencing, and attachment styles. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
let's
first,
get
I'll
into
give you just a short, your listeners, a short history of attachment theory, and then we'll
yes.
go into the four attachment styles, and I'll give you the connection with the nervous system. So, the attachment theory history, it began back in the 50s and 60s. A guy named John Bowlby was one of the first attachment theorists, and then a couple others carried his work on, Mary Ainsworth and Donald Winnicott. It's all about how children and infants specifically attach to their parents and what happens when their parents aren't there and how they react. And they found that there were basically two or three different ways they reacted. They either became avoidant, they became anxious,
Mm-hmm.
or in severe cases, when there was a lot of chaos, they became disorganized. And then if they had 30% or more in our book of connection, and they were able to have a secure attachment style.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Attachment theory is basically our evolutionary system that motivates a infant or child to seek connection with their parent, and it's basically our bonding system.
How do we respond to, say, separation?
Yeah.
Right? Is it, oh, okay, cool. I know you're coming back, right? This was initially done with babies, I think,
Yeah.
right? They
Yeah.
noticed that, when a parent would walk out of the room, would a baby get absolutely hysterical? Or would the baby just be completely detached and sort of dissociated? Or would there be sort of acknowledgement and, maybe, okay, but I know mommy comes back. I
Yes.
know I feel safe and secure in my attachment. So when my mom leaves the room, I don't freak the fuck out.
Right. Right. Well, and here's the thing is infants are not able to regulate their own nervous system. Right. And so that's why they need to have we need, as parents, we need to help them regulate their nervous system until their vagus nerve is developed enough that they can start learning how to regulate themselves. And one of the ways that we as parents can help them, one is the co-regulation, but also we teach them they grow up to learn how to self-regulate as well.
Mhm.
Unless we as a parent are showing up very anxious or very avoidant ourselves, and then we pass that gift along to our kids.
Yay! Or we do some work and healing and we don't.
Exactly, which is the goal.
So okay, so it's interesting, right? It's like so the link between our attachment styles and our nervous system responses is actually quite straightforward, right? In that
Yes.
it is a nervous system response.
It's our nervous system response.
The attachment style is that, right?
Yes.
It's either, anxious or panicky, or it's sort of dissociated in that avoidant way.
Right. So there's 4 types. So we have our anxious, we have our avoidant, we have disorganized, which is a combination of anxious and avoidant typically, and then we have a secure. So if we're anxious, typically what happened is when you were younger is you needed as you got older and you were able to learn to regulate your own or adapt to regulate your own nervous system, you were a person that I need everyone around me to be okay so I can feel okay. So that is our sympathetic. That's when we stay in our sympathetic nervous system. I need to make sure because my mom or dad or combination is dysregulated themselves. So if I make them okay, then I then can feel secure and okay inside. And so then we end up doing that in our adult relationships, which shows up as people pleasing and, discounting what we need in our relationships. And what I want to say to the listeners about all of this is this is, this doesn't make you bad. This is helping you understand of like how you showed up and how you survived. And it's what got you to where you are today.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And what we're talking about, just to sort of put other language to it too, is the basics of, I'm okay if you're okay.
Yeah.
I'll make you okay, so I'm okay, is the
Yeah.
basics of codependence. And, I think you and I are both trained in the PM Melody version of codependence that is rooted in trauma. It's rooted in childhood trauma. It's rooted in all of this attachment stuff that we're talking about. And I think, learning about it is the most important thing that we can do, because it does we become people pleasers. But the root of all of that is this codependency.
Definitely. Because and the anxious if you're an anxious attachment style, you need that connection. That's the codependency, because you have a fear of abandonment. You crave connection. You have a yearning, and sometimes you don't feel complete or you feel lost without having somebody there, because you have learned that my nervous system feels safe when I'm in connection with somebody else, even if it's not healthy, even if I'm having to be codependent on this person.
That's right. Was that sort of part of in your marriage, the breakdown of your marriage, and how you got to the place where you were hospitalized? Was it because that was taken away, that connection, whether it was toxic or otherwise?
No, for me, I mean, that was definitely a piece of it, because when I left my marriage, first of all, it took a long time for me to leave my marriage because of the codependency and because of my anxious attachment style, because I'm adopted, because I didn't always feel safe growing up, all of those things. And I just thought, if I make him happy and my kids happy and everybody, and be the glue. And so I didn't tend to my needs, even though I was doing yoga and I was doing, energy work and reading spiritual and self-help books. My nervous system was very dysregulated and I took on too much too soon
Mm-hmm.
when I left my marriage.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what did it for my nervous system. It shut me
Mm-hmm.
down.
Yes. Okay. I want to talk more about that on the other side of the break. We're going to just take a quick break. And on the other side, I want to dig a little bit more deeply into what you just said, because I think it's actually really interesting and important. So we'll be right back. Divorce is overwhelming. I know. I've been there. That's why I created a set of tools to help my private coaching clients navigate the process with clarity and confidence. Now those same tools are available to you in the Divorce Survival Guide Resource Bundle, a collection of over 20 documents to support you at every stage. Inside, you'll find things like how to tell your kids you're getting a divorce, a comprehensive parenting plan template, questions to ask when hiring an attorney, tools for processing relationship grief, plus my divorce planner to track everything from finances to custody arrangements, and 20 more resources I can't even get into listing here. These are the exact resources I created for my clients, now available for anyone going through divorce. You don't have to do this alone. Get the bundle today at kateanthony.com/bundle. Divorce is hard. No question about it. The uncertainty, the isolation, it can feel like you're drowning. But you don't have to go through this alone. There's a place where you can gather with other women going through divorce and get expert advice from professionals like me. Phoenix Rising, a divorce empowerment collective. Phoenix Rising is an ongoing group coaching program designed to walk you through some of the hardest parts of your divorce in community with other women who are going through it too. In Phoenix Rising, you get 3 live coaching sessions with me every month, plus a guest expert call with a top industry professional every month. You'll learn exactly what to do, when and how, but more importantly, you'll have a community of women who truly understand. Because when women come together and share their stories, something powerful happens. We rise, we gain strength, we reclaim our voices, and we move forward, not just surviving, but thriving. Inside Phoenix Rising, you'll get expert guidance, a safe and supportive space, and the kind of sisterhood that changes everything. Enrollment is always open, so join us at kateanthony.com/decided today. That's kateanthony.com/decided, and we will welcome you with open arms. Okay, guys, we are back with Laurie James, and we are talking about your nervous system. We're talking about somatic healing, and we are talking about how that intersects with attachment styles. So before we took a break, you were talking about how you were doing all of the healing things that we tell everyone to do. You were doing yoga. You were doing this. You were doing all of the things that we might prescribe to our clients to do, but it was too much.
Yeah.
And it led to this burnout and hospitalization. So I'm really curious about that, where that tipped over into too muchness when you would think like, I'm doing yoga, I'm doing all the things, I should be okay.
Because I had an anxious attachment style and I had lived up in my sympathetic nervous system. So I was the one that moved out of the house. As we all know, divorce is the second most stressful thing you can experience. Moving is in the top 5. So I was doing both of those things. I was going through probably not the most challenging divorce, but let's just say that my ex-husband did not make things easy. I stayed home to raise my kids. He was a businessman. Like, he was in the finance world. He was fairly successful in his career. And so he knew how to negotiate. The only thing I negotiated was the carpool.
Right.
And maybe a PTA email. Like, I didn't have his skills.
Right.
So and I started dating too soon.
Oh, girl, same. So way too soon.
Wait at least a year, maybe longer, depending on who you are. Do some work. And I dated too soon because I had this yearning to attach.
Right.
So it's like, it's this push pull. I want to attach, but am I really ready? Am I want to attach? Am I really ready?
Right.
And also was in the process of writing my book. What happened was in that period of time, I signed my divorce papers. Within 1 week, I made an offer on a house.
Mm-hmm.
Then a month or how many ever, 60 days later, I got my signed divorce papers. I closed escrow on my house. 3 days later, I was in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Mm-hmm.
too much for my nervous system. My nervous system was overwhelmed and it shut down.
So it doesn't matter all of the healing modalities that you were doing. And sometimes, the other thing, I know that when I have been in these severe elevated states or like persistent sympathetic
Yeah.
states,
Uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh.
Exercise, working out, the kinds of working out that I was doing that are pushing you into a sympathetic, like not yoga, like it wasn't calming, it wasn't bringing me down into a rest and digest, right? Maybe yoga nidra or something would have been good for
Yeah.
me, some sort of restful. But I was going to the gym and doing high impact cardio, strength training, all of that stuff that pushes you into a even
Yes.
further sympathetic, right? You're like, it was traumatizing my body at the same time.
Yeah. And then you're just running on adrenals, right?
Yes.
And then you're not
Absolutely.
sleeping.
That's when I bottomed out and went to, because I thought I was like, well, I got to get this energy out. I've got to get this,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's that combo. And so one of the things that I'll do is if I feel like I'm going up too far into my sympathetic nervous system after working out, I will
Mm-hmm.
come home and I'll lay on the couch or lay on my bed and just tap into what are the sensations I'm feeling and let that energy come down, let that energy dissipate out of my system. And
Yes.
it takes sometimes I only need 2 minutes. Sometimes I need 5 minutes. Sometimes I need 10 minutes. But it's that simple of just allowing our bodies that 5, 10 minutes to come down.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because
Yeah.
that's what a healthy nervous system does.
Yeah. And, I think so many of us are taught to power through, right? We're just going to keep powering through, but
Yes.
that's keeping us in this disconnected state. So
Yes.
I love the idea of, just lying down, lie down.
Yeah.
I'm a
But the
fan of
key
the,
is to connect with the
yes.
sensations. Don't lie down and get on your phone. Don't lie down. I mean, you can play soft music. Don't lie down and watch TV for 10 minutes because that is taking you out of your body.
Mm-hmm.
Stay with the sensations. I have a lot of bubbling. I have a lot of tingling in my body often, and just be with that. It's just your nervous system. There's nothing wrong with what's going on in your body, and it's befriending it.
Well, right. And it's not trying to change it. It's not like, oh, I have tension in my chest, so I need to do something about that. It's just, oh, look at that. That's interesting. I have tension in my chest. So
Yeah,
be with the tension in your chest, right?
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's okay. I mean, and what happens is that our nervous system, because our nervous system does create our thoughts and our feelings and our behavior. So when we get that restriction in our chest or we get this heightened state, the sympathetic state,
Mm-hmm.
we think something's wrong because it's sending a signal to our brain as this doesn't feel safe. So that's why we try and move away. But when we can retrain ourselves of like, okay, this is just my body reacting, it's not unsafe, then that helps to rewire our nervous system
Right.
and develop a better relationship with our nervous system.
Mm-hmm. We are not in the woods being chased by a bear.
No,
Our nervous
even though
system
it
is
feels like it.
reacting, right? And our nervous system is reacting as if we are, but that's actually not happening,
Yeah,
right? So we kind of have to kind of talk ourselves down a little bit from,
yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Do you want me to go into avoidant or do you want to stay on
Oh,
anxious?
yes. No, let's
Okay.
talk about avoidant because,
Okay.
yes,
So avoidant,
used to love to date them.
yes. Well, apparently I still do.
Well, yeah, I guess.
Or did.
Yes, you did. We'll talk about that in a minute. Lori
Yeah, it's okay.
just got out of a 3-year relationship, but in a very different fashion than she
Very
got out of
different.
her
Very different.
marriage. We'll touch on
Yes,
that in a minute.
very different. But so avoidant is when we were young, our caregivers maybe didn't feel safe all the time, and they might be disassociated themselves. They were off doing other things. They weren't able to be present with us. And so what we end up having to do is shutting down our emotions so that way we can feel safe, because it felt too dangerous for us to show up with our needs and our emotions. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that our and here's the kicker is it doesn't mean that our emotions and our feelings go away. It's just your system pushes your emotions down, or
Mm-hmm.
you go into what we call in the somatic world a freeze state. It's a threat response.
It really is, I think, sort of on a subconscious level, or maybe conscious, but usually subconscious as children, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I don't matter.
Yeah.
I don't matter. My needs aren't being attended to. I don't matter. So I will just go inward and
Withdraw.
and
Go ahead.
withdraw, right?
Yeah.
I don't need anybody. I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Mhm.
I don't need anybody. It's hard for, as adult, it shows up. It's like hard to reach out for support. You have a trouble feeling your emotions because you have shut them down for so long. So it takes a little bit longer to connect with them. In your adult relationships, like you have a desire to want a relationship, but when somebody gets too close, you push them away, right? Because it feels dangerous because you didn't have that close connection when you were younger. And so your nervous system looks at past experience of like, this feels too much and it's too close. So I'm going to push this away because this doesn't feel good.
Right, right, exactly. And so that what that looks like in relationship, you're dating somebody who's avoidant, that will look like they sort of present like they want to be with you, but then anytime you get emotionally close, they bail. You
Right.
don't hear from them for, they stop texting you for a couple of weeks, or like
Yeah.
they're inconsistent, right? There's like this, oh, yes, everything's great for a few weeks, and then they're gone, and you're like, what? I don't know what's happening.
Right. Or
Where'd you
you have
go?
a disconnect of some sort and they don't communicate with you for 3 days. So I dated a guy before COVID who was very avoidant, and we totally triggered each other.
Yeah.
I'm anxious, he's avoidant. And so we would have a little mix up, or we'd step on each other's toes, and he would just not text me for 3 days. And my anxious attachment style, it would just I literally would like crawl up in a fetal position on the floor, and I was like, oh my God, I feel like a baby. And I did. I had this visualization, and I had been working with my own somatic experiencing practitioner. So I knew, but I was literally curled up on the ball on my floor. And I had this vision of me in my baby car seat reaching, and nobody was there. And so I processed that with my SEP, and we worked through it. And I was like, oh my God, that's what it feels like when you are an anxious attachment style and you have an interaction with an avoidant. It feels like you might die
It does.
because
That's right.
as a child, if you didn't get your needs met in some way, it was
You
life
would
or
die.
death. You
Absolutely.
were going to die if you didn't get the attention, if you didn't get the comfort, if you didn't get the food you needed.
Absolutely.
And that's how our nervous system shows up in the present until we learn to work with it. And, there's really two pieces of the somatic experiencing. It's nervous system regulation. And then there's the other piece of healing the trauma, which is the past.
Right. Okay. Oh, do they work in conjunction with each other, or
We
is
typically
it?
work in conjunction, but like for your listeners, if somebody's going through a divorce, I wouldn't do too much trauma healing during the divorce. It's like, yes, let's work on the nervous system regulation and understanding how you're showing up when you have mediation or you have interactions with your ex or soon to be ex and all that. But don't do any deep healing until after that is over because you're too raw and you're
You're not
too
safe.
in and
Yeah.
you're not in a safe place right now.
Right. That's right. You cannot heal from trauma you're still experiencing. Now,
Yes.
when you get a little bit more distance, like if you're in a high conflict divorce with somebody who is, engaging in post-separation abuse, it doesn't mean you never get to do the healing work. You just have to
Right.
get to a place where the boundaries are a little stronger and there's a little bit more distance.
Right. And you feel like you have, right, the distance so that way you have the capacity. And
Hmm.
we do it, small, we call them small titrated steps, just small, tolerable doses. We kind of touch the edges of like
Yes,
when we go into the trauma, we just touch the edges. And then the next time we might go a little bit deeper because we don't want to re traumatize you by
that's right.
any means at all.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So I'm curious. I would love to hear. We've talked about this a little bit on your show again,
Yeah.
but you did just go through a breakup
Yeah. Yeah.
and you are not hospitalized and your nervous system is
Yay.
not right. Win. But your nervous system is also not in complete free fall. I mean,
No.
you've said to me, you're like, of course, like I'm sad. I have feelings, but
Yeah.
they're not swallowing you whole. So
Yes.
I'm curious if you can share with our listeners the difference in the experience that you're having and to what you attribute it.
I'll share. So when I left my marriage, as I alluded to earlier, I had this yearning to connect right away. And so I started dating about 6 months after I left my marriage, which was way too soon because I had this yearning, this pull of
Six
like,
months, girl. I was like, I was still in the house. I was like, come on, let's go. New
yeah, let's
husband.
get things, let's get things on,
Let's revolve this door.
right? It's that yearning, that pull of I need to connect, I need to attach so that way I can feel safe.
I'll be
And
okay.
I talk to my therapist friends and they're like, and one of my girlfriends who's similar, so we have a lot in common. Like she's the same. It's like you have this like this yearning, this pull, for lack of better word, of like I need to be with somebody so I can feel safe.
That's right. I mean, to me, it felt like a compulsion, like an
Yeah.
addiction, really.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you're on the apps constantly and you're like, and then you might, when somebody like doesn't text you back, you're like, sending a nasty note to them and it's impulse that you cannot control.
That's right.
And this time around, and I'll get into the work that I've done, this time around, it's like, what's interesting is he actually broke up with me.
This guy.
I was feeling it literally 2 nights before I was up and I was like, this is not working. I'm feeling very disconnected. And then I kind of did some somatic work. I'm like, okay, maybe this is just my nervous system overreacting. And then sure enough, I was like, I'm feeling disconnected from you. Can we find a way to reconnect? And he couldn't and basically said, I don't think I'm the person for you. I said, okay, well, I think this is a different conversation then.
Hmm.
And during that conversation, I was so calm. And I even said, well, this is not how I thought this conversation was going to go. But there was a sense of calm in my system. And there is a difference between a 26-year marriage and a 3-year relationship, of
Sure.
course. But I was like, okay. And my girlfriends came over, two of my closest girlfriends came over the next night because, of course, I'm texting them like, we
Yeah.
split up. And they're like, oh my God, Laurie, like, you are good.
You're
Like,
okay.
you're
Yeah.
okay. And these were my anchors through
Hmm.
my divorce, right? And
Hmm.
they're like, this is phenomenal. in comparison. And it doesn't mean that I haven't cried, that I
Sure.
haven't had hard mornings, that I haven't wanted to text him, but it's just like the more practical side of me or my nervous system is going, yeah, but if I text him, like, what, to get
To
back
what end?
together?
Right.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
if it didn't work the first
Mm-hmm.
time, it's not going to work the second time. And I'm not going to compromise what I need. And that's when the embodiment comes in of like, it's just this knowing in in your nervous system, that secure feeling of, yeah, I miss him. Yeah, there's things that I miss, but I'm good.
I'm okay. That's
I'm okay and I'm safe. And if I do get upset, I know how to self-soothe. I know what I need. Reach out to a friend if I
hmm
need that. Take a warm bath, take a walk with my dog, go to reconnect with people.
Yes.
Last night I went to there was a local festival and Alanis Morissette was
Oh, that's
playing.
right. That's
Oh
right.
my,
Yeah, I
she's
know.
so awesome. And I
Uh,
was like, oh, I could sit on my couch and just watch TV. But then I'm like, then
or
I'm just going to feel a little sad. And I went with my girlfriends. We had the best time. Right.
yeah,
And sometimes you got to give yourself that little push
yeah.
too. I've worked with an SEP for 5 years. I've went through the training myself, which you have to continue to do the work because
Yes, right.
you're practicing, you're the experiencer, you're the practicer through 2.5 years of training. So you get additional healing through it.
hmm
And I have lived in a body that I didn't know that I was anxious for most of my life. And it's like, wow, this is what it feels like. And the best way to describe it is a generally a relaxed alertness.
Yes, I love that. I love that. It's not that we are, so zen and blissed out that like nothing touches us, right? Because that's bullshit.
Exactly. And you're nervous, like that is an unrealistic state to live in.
That's right. Life doesn't work that way. I mean,
No.
look, if you're a monk and you're not actually like experiencing relationships or being in the world, fine. But that's not what we're doing here. And just to highlight for our listeners too, that what you're talking about when we say that attachment styles are not fixed, that
Yes.
you can become more secure,
Yes.
that you can do work to go from having an anxious attachment style to a secure attachment style is literally what you just described.
Yeah.
That you got broken up with, this relationship ended, and you did not have a total,
Meltdown.
somatic breakdown. It wasn't like, oh God, I'm not enough. I'm defective. What's wrong with me? I'm going to die.
Right.
It was,
It's this
oh,
person is not my person.
not my person.
I'm not going to settle. And I know that there is somebody out there for me.
hmm
And embodying that and feeling that,
Yes,
not just saying it, because we can say it, but until we feel it in our body, that's what a safe and secure feeling is from a nervous system standpoint and from an attachment style standpoint, is when you can feel it inside.
that's right. Yes, yes, yes. Amen, sister. I love it.
There is the anxious avoidant combo,
Oh, yes. Great.
which is also
The
called disorganized,
disorganized.
which is basically the combination of both
Right.
of the anxious and avoidant. But what happens is, that's when we have this deep desire to connect with somebody and then we push them away. And when we've lived in chaos and that chaos feels comfortable, so we keep going back to that
Create
chaos.
it. Right. We create it. We crave it. We are attracted to it.
And it feels boring when
Uh-huh.
we don't have it,
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
which I've also because, like you said, this is all a spectrum. I mean, there have been times when I was in my 26-year marriage when I felt secure. There
Mm-hmm.
were times when I felt avoidant. There were times when I felt anxious, and there were times when I felt anxious and avoidant.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
that I think is normal, but the more we can move to feeling secure within and then feeling secure with others.
And I think the more secure you feel within and with others, when the relationship starts to feel funky, or right, when you start to feel anxious in your relationship, but you also know that you have done a lot of work, then you can more objectively assess the
Hmm.
relationship itself, right?
Hmm.
You said, I feel disconnected from you. Can
Yeah.
we work, right? And it wasn't a panic. It
Mm-mm.
was, but then it was like, oh, but there is something that's not quite working for me in this relationship. And you shared with me on your show that, this was a person who was not really willing to do a lot of the work. And that is such a misalignment, just objective misalignment for somebody who has dedicated their life to doing the kind of work that you're doing.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes in a relationship that takes time to figure out.
Yes.
Right. And
Absolutely.
because, you have that phase of a relationship where you're showing up as your best self. The more you spend time with somebody, and there were definitely some red flags early on. And there were times when he would make an effort to do the work,
Mm-hmm.
but then he would kind of retreat back as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave him grace and I never asked him to read any books, but like he would ask, hey, what are some books that you recommend for me? And, he did put himself into some therapy. So I have to give him credit for
Yeah.
that. I don't know that he was fully, and this is my own speculation, I don't know if he was fully being honest with himself and her about everything that was
Mm-hmm.
going on, but that's just my speculation.
Sure.
One of the other things I was going to suggest is or share with your listeners is how do you know which attachment style you are?
Oh, great. That's great. It's a great question because there are 1,000 online quizzes you can take.
Yeah.
How would you recommend that people?
So the simplest way for each of them, I would say if you're in typical relationships, whether it's a close friend, your children, or a partner, if you need to repair or fix whatever is wrong right away, and if you don't, you feel panicked or anxious,
Mm,
and you can't stop thinking about it until it's resolved, which
mm.
I've been there,
That's, yep. Been
that's
there, been there.
anxious,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
right?
Yep.
If you want to pull away or shut down and feel disconnected to what you're actually feeling inside and you
Mm.
struggle to verbalize what you're experiencing, you're typically avoidant,
Yeah. Been there too.
right? You freeze, you feel scared or
Uh-huh.
unsure of what to do, whether you want to be with the person and be connected or far away. You're probably disorganized or anxious and avoidant combo.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know the relationship isn't over and the current disconnect can be resolved, which is the place that I was coming from, this
Yeah.
conversation, once you're both feeling regulated in your nervous system, then you're secure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ultimately goal. Like we're not always going to feel that place of security, but sometimes you have to wait until you're more grounded, centered, feeling more regulated before you have that conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that there are people that we get into relationship with that will trigger, right? An avoidant will trigger, someone who's anxious.
Totally.
And, an anxious attachment style, someone with an anxious attachment will trigger somebody who's avoidant. And so, if you're with someone who's secure and you're also that it helps you feel more secure, right? It's
Yeah.
just there. So they can also play off each other in ways that it's like, wait a minute, is that me or is this that? But
Yeah.
if you have done the work and you're inherently secure and the relationship is kicking up your anxiety, then like maybe this is not the relationship for you because it's triggering stuff that you've actually worked on. And it
Right.
feels like a misalignment.
Yeah. Right. And
Mhm.
that line can be fuzzy and
Mhm.
sometimes hard to discern. It takes a little time to discern that, I think, when you get into a relationship, right? Because
Yes.
there's a certain amount of healing you can do out before you get into a relationship. If any listeners, think that they want to get into a relationship after their divorce, but there's also a certain amount of healing that can only happen in relationship.
That's right. That's right. That's what my therapist used to say. She was like, we're all great. We're all amazing at relationships when we're single.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Like it's the getting into the relationship and actually doing the thing
Right?
that is, going to trigger your shit. And then you're going to figure out if, you're going to have to work through it, and figure out how to do that in healthy ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Laurie, this has been a wonderful conversation. Any final words of wisdom that you want to leave our listeners with?
So I just want to leave your listeners with, if you do identify as an anxious attachment and you struggle, typically you're going to struggle with that self-regulation. Some of the best exercises that you can do are what we call in the somatic world stabilization or grounding exercise, to
Mm-hmm.
move your system down into a parasympathetic or rest and digest state, and to
Mm-hmm.
give your nervous system that break from being in that sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're avoidant attachment, really working on that codependent co-regulation with someone, whether, and if you're not in a relationship, maybe that's uh, girlfriends or family members, and learning to be with others more in tolerable doses. Or even, like, I've worked with some clients where they've felt very disconnected, and I'm like, even at the Starbucks, can you feel like when somebody says, wow, like, I love that sweatshirt that you're wearing, Kate? Can you take that in and feel that in your body, even if
Mm-hmm.
it's just 5%, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to
Right.
help your nervous system learn how to co-regulate. And of course, if you're disorganized, you have to do a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm. Depending on the situation.
Depending on the situation.
Right. Right.
And I do have a free beginner's guide to somatic healing that people can download, that walks you deeper into how to do this,
That's
if anybody's
wonderful.
interested.
100%. Do you have a link for that? We'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, you can find it on my website at Laurie, Laurie, middle initial E, James, but I'll also make sure that you have that link as well, so you can throw it into the show notes.
Perfect. Laurie, thank you so, so, so much. I love the work you're doing.
Thank
I love
you.
talking to you about it.
Ditto.
Yeah, it's just great. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you again.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.